Have you ever noticed how painted images are all around us? That's where I come in. I'm a curator at an art gallery. I choose paintings for people to look at, and I'm on a mission to show you why looking is worth it, to show you why painting matters. It can challenge you, play with you, and even lift your soul. Come with me on this journey through art and you'll see the world through new eyes. In the world of painting, there's a rift between old and new. Some people like old traditional art, while others like the new stuff. The two seem to be worlds apart. Is the divide between the old and the new uncrossable? To find out, I've come to one of the birthplaces of New Zealand painting. This is Venice. This is where it all began. Italy's famous floating city, conjured up from a few muddy sandbanks in a lagoon. Every alleyway oozes history. 500 years ago, Europe was undergoing a rebirth. It was coming out of the Dark Ages and into a new kind of light. And Venice was the place to be. The place to be for architecture. The place to be for music. The place to be for wealth. Today, Venice is one of the mightiest tourist cities on the planet. Back then, it was one of the mightiest cities on the planet, period. And this Grand Canal was its main highway. Constant flow of commerce and product and trade. Even the hearses float. And like any powerful city, Venice wanted to see itself reflected in images and objects and architecture. So into the palaces and the churches and the business buildings of the city come images made by one of the most spirited, competitive, rule-changing communities of artists that painting had ever seen. To feel your way back into that historical moment, this is the place to come. The Gallery dell'Accademia. And the challenge of keeping the architectural past alive is clear to see. The whole place is receiving a facelift. So how lively is the painted past looking on the walls inside? Now, this huge and totally engrossing painting is by a member of one of the most famous painting families in Renaissance Venice. It's by Gentile Bellini, and it's called Procession in Piazza San Marco. It's a painting in which a religious event, a kind of miracle, is occurring. But that's not what we notice, first of all. We notice the things that characterise Venetian painting in the Golden Age. You stand in front of it and what you feel is the richness, the gold on the face of San Marco, and the wonderful intensified attention that Bellini is paying to every single face in that crowd. So Bellini is using the technology of oil on canvas to sell, as an ad man might sell today, this huge billboard-sized advertisement for the power and unity of the Venetian Republic. And at the time, power was tied to religion. The Bible is full of stories that play out in the dusty landscapes of the Middle East. But here's an altarpiece by the most famous of the Bellini brothers, Giovanni. It's the Sangiovese altarpiece, A Madonna and Child. Ordinary stuff if you've looked at religious art, but something extraordinary happens here. That religious event from far away from the East has been located in the heart of Venice. Bellini has placed these figures in a space that is very much like the interior of the Church of San Marco. And Bellini seals the deal visually by dressing his Madonna in the cascading fabrics Venetian merchants love to trade. He makes his Madonna look like a Venetian. What Bellini is saying is that the power of that biblical tradition and the power of Venice are one. And the painter who pushes his own language farthest is Titian. Behind me is his Pieta, and it was the last painting that Titian made. It's a painting of the dead Christ in the arms of his mother, and it's seeded with all kinds of symbols that relate to the biblical story. The pelican tearing its breast in the alcove above Christ, a traditional symbol of Christ's suffering. In the bottom right corner, there's a painting within the painting which portrays Titian and his son Orazio applying to the heavens for relief from the plague that's tearing Venice apart. But for me, it's not those symbols that give this painting its power, its wrenching human force. What gives it that power is paint. Get close to this work and the very language of painting seems to be breaking down before our eyes. The forms break down into rushes and dashes of white in that soot-dark, tomb-like space. So as you look, you have to piece together the event that Titian is painting. You have to participate in this image. There's so much about painting that we take for granted that gets its start in Renaissance Venice. The idea of painting on canvas gets up to speed here. The idea of paintings as something you sell begins here. And above all, what begins here is the idea of painting as a kind of productive rivalry between a group of artists who are trying to outdo each other in the best possible way. The commercial power of Venice powered up its art. Money meant building, and building meant walls, and walls meant paintings. Take this place, the Scuola Grande di San Rocco, where my favourite Venetian hotshot, Tintoretto, takes scale and colour and propaganda to a whole new level. So the story goes that the painters of Venice were invited to pitch for this huge job, but Tintoretto went one further. Not only did he make a painting, he managed to smuggle it into this building and have it installed for the commissioners to see. And when they did see it, the job was his. And man, did he deliver. I take back my hotshot comment. Let's go with his Venetian nickname, Tintoretto the Furious. Furious T was a showman, but unashamedly so. This room must have been like the cinema of its time. If Tintoretto was a movie director, I imagine him saying, give me more light, give me more smoke, give me more. He was like the special effects man of his day. Tintoretto's telling a story. It's the story of the life of Christ. And every image here is not something static, it's an event. Now, the event in question here is the baptism of Christ, and that word baptism might suggest something serene and calm and quiet, but that's not what Tintoretto gives us. The clouds break open, light breaks through, we see streaks of white paint sitting right on the surface of the dark undercolours. Below it, this ghostly procession of figures, again painted with audacious sketchiness, seem to walk out of the heavens towards us, and all this rolling, turbulent energy is pulling the eye down towards the focus of the composition, Christ's face and that firecracker burst of light behind it. And here we have the resurrection. It's one of the most extreme scenes in the Passion story. So we see angels opening the door of the tomb, but it's not an easy job for them. They look like ordinary mortals who are straining with the effort. We feel the weight of that door. And there, just a few metres away from us, Christ is bursting forth in a blaze of light. It's as if Tintoretto's saying that this other world, the world of the supernatural, the world of the spiritual, is not miles from us. It's right next door. Tintoretto's works here are a non-stop, all-round, full-volume tour de force of painterly painting. Painting that doesn't hide the fact that it's made of paint. Christ may be the star of individual paintings, but there's no missing the real star of the overall show. Tintoretto and his act of creation. Now, they call them the old masters, but I think that word old is wrong. The scale of these paintings, the heat and kick of the colour, the swagger and bravado and fluidity of the brushwork, all of these things in their time are startlingly new. Perhaps we should call them the new masters. It's a real powerhouse moment for painting, and painters ever since have been drawing energy from it. You see this 200 years ago in British landscape painting. You see it 60 years ago in American abstract painting. And you see it today in the work of a New Zealand artist who's giving the Venetian tradition an unexpected lease of life on the wild west coast. Goodbye, Grand Canal. Hello, New Zealand. Venice and its masterpieces are a world away, and I'm wondering about old and new. How do the glories of Venetian painting connect with life here and now? Is Tintoretto just too grand and distant to mean something to us today? There's an answer in an unlikely place, a clifftop studio on Auckland's west coast where Judy Miller's making brand new paintings. Judy's one of the country's most successful abstract painters. Her work hits you with spills and swipes of runny colour. And those swipes open up an amazing sense of space, forms swooping in, ribboning back, performing impossible acrobatics. Can we unroll this one?
Yeah. We'll put it up, shall we?
To bring it off, Judy uses some unusual devices, including enormous brushes. My favourite has to be this one over here, which has a kind of Mad Max frontier quality to it.
This gets all its brushes put on and it gives me just one very big brush. Obviously I could go bigger than that, but they start to get quite heavy when they've got 7 or 8 brushes tacked onto them.
Judy's paintings look abstract and modern, but she's inspired by a much older painter, none other than Tintoretto. That may sound weird because her work has no recognisable scenes, no baptisms or crucifixions, but it's as if she's taken a magnifying glass to the old master's brushstrokes, zooming right in on their energy and drama.
When you look at those Tintoretto paintings, they're painted with brushes this big. People think he was there with these tiny little brushes. They're not. They're far away. It's like looking at a billboard for us. They whacked it in. They were covering large amounts of space in a day. It wasn't Michelangelo up there with a little brush lying on his back. It's not at all how they were painted.
Yeah.
They're very physical and very fast.
Judy's painting looks nothing like the old masters. So what's the story with paint in which the paint is just doing its own thing? For many people, a picture that is not obviously of something. There's not a sheep, there's not a rainbow, there's not a landscape. That kind of painting poses a bit of a challenge. What are you going to tell them about these paintings?
Well, I mean, the first thing about a lot of my work is that I use very high-key colour. Everyone responds to colour. I think that you can't not respond as a human being to colour. And that brings up associations, undoubtedly, for everybody.
These works have quite joyous, lifting colours. But here we have sort of interference patterns on an old black and white television or something. The palette is darker, but the energy or the movement in this one is more turbulent, agitated, ragged. When people talk about your work, do you want those sorts of emotive responses?
You know, living is laughing and crying as much as it is anything else. So, yeah, art has to address those things. If you look at a painting like this, there are obvious things that perhaps could be happening on different levels. Something's in the background here exploding out, and you've got this single movement on the surface, which is of another time.
One looks and at first thinks that this is a negative space, we're looking through it, but then when you look at this edge, it appears to be something that's looming forward. It's like a great big head or skull.
Yeah, painting is a physical thing. It's really, we know it's like basically just coloured dirt on the surface, and we can see it and we can feel it, but at the same time it sets up illusions.
In Judy's hands, New Zealand painting is going somewhere it's never been. Venice. And a big show called the Venice Biennale. She's the first New Zealander to take the old medium of painting to the largest new art show on the planet. And before leaving, she's sending her paintings through a very contemporary process. You're not just taking paintings to Venice, but you're taking big photographic prints of your own paintings.
Yeah, this is a tiny little, very early sample. This comes from this work. So basically we're seeing a piece that's been lifted out of the painting just like that. Section. Yeah, tiny section.
You're a completely committed, passionate enthusiast of the old technology of oil on canvas. And here you are heading down to the Digital Copy Centre and getting scans of your paintings and producing big billboard-like vinyl skins. What's happening?
Well, I'm thinking of it just as another tool, and it's the exaggerations. I just want to see how they look, really. That's what's driving it. I want to see how I feel standing in front of these things, which are obviously handmade marks, which are just on a colossal scale.
Colossal art, colossal challenges. Making the paintings is one thing, but then you have to find a space to hang them, and then from half a world away, imagine how they will hang. Judy's solution to these challenges goes against the grain. She's not going to hang them at all. So these are going to stand in your space?
Yeah,
right?
some of them will lie like
these.
this, you know, they're going to kind of hang around.
You're actually coming down off the walls onto the floor. Why is it important for paintings not to fit?
Because I don't fit there. So I want to push that unfittingness and just see just how much friction I can gain by putting these things into Venice from this part of the world, from now, in a city which has very little of now.
Ahead of Judy lies one of the grandest old art cities there is, where every second wall seems to swirl with masterpieces. So how will her abstract paintings fit into this old world? "500 years ago, Venice sent art out to the world. And now, the world of art is coming to Venice. Dealers, museum directors, artists, journos, junketeers and professional gawkers like me. We're all heading for the Venice Biennale. But I'm here on a different mission. I want to find out whether the old and new can live together. And I'm looking for New Zealand painter Judy Miller to find the answer. This is undoubtedly the biggest of the art world mega shows. Every 2 years, artists and art lookers from all over the world come together for this huge, rowdy, slightly insane festival of images and objects. And every time it gets rowdier, insaner. Since it kicked off in 1895, more than 30 countries have squeezed themselves into this toy town of national pavilions. But New Zealand isn't one of them, which means we're going to have to hunt elsewhere for Judy Miller and her paintings. In fact, painting generally is hard to find. New media rule the roads. There are videos that propel you towards outback horizons. There are installations like Death of a Collector that invite you to play detective. This is the scene of the crime. There's art you see before you realise it's art. These historic rooms are buzzing, whirring, bursting with the new. It's an adventure playground of art now. So there's new art here that reaches elastically from wall to wall, made by an artist who's inspired by do-it-yourself architecture, cellular structure, and the webs made by black widow spiders. There's new art that takes you down into some strange hothouse environment where all kinds of bizarre creations grow. It's like the Botanic Gardens on acid in here. There's new art that's made from pieces of the ordinary world. This artist, Richard Wentworth, has taken his pieces from a library full of dictionaries of many languages and lofted them into the air to create a kind of suspended babble of many tongues. Art overload is inevitable. Connecting it up in one day is impossible. But the day's not done and the mission's not over. There's one big connection I do want to chase tonight. I'm heading back into the old world of Venice to find out how Judy Miller's new paintings fit in. To get an answer, I've come not to a white-walled gallery space, but to the home of old painting, a church. It's opening night for Judy Miller. New Zealand meets old Venice. And I'm clearly not the only one curious to see how Judy's modern vision is going to fit into this historic space.
Judy's paintings, although abstract, has the flesh tones of Tintoretto's figures at its heart.
I'm in and it's a rush, a great occupation of a marvellous old space. It's as if Judy's pulled painting off the walls where it lived traditionally and whirled it around in the centre of the church. I love this. This is a fantastic view, isn't it? It has a whirlwind quality, a cyclonic effect that feels emphatically new. Yet Judy's work is also totally immersed in painting's past. Getting close to this tidal wave of paint's like being launched right into the weave of one of Tintoretto's canvases. So here you are in a church. It's an old space. It's the home of historical painting. And you've brought work in that looks new. What conversations did you feel beginning between those works and your own as you started to stretch these huge bits of vinyl over those enormous wooden frames?
Well, it was really putting them in place, and there were suddenly things starting to kick off other things. Little orange robes falling into orange shapes on my canvases. There is an angel's wing that sort of appears alongside an angel, and these things just happen because of the juxtapositions.
And what is it in Tintoretto that you are in some ways trying to reincarnate or bring to life in your own show?
Well, Tintoretto is I suppose for me, someone who took up really painterly painting. So it's all about the brush and movement and very exciting developments of dynamic space. And also, the desire to overwhelm. There was a time when the church even wanted him to simply overwhelm with the glory of his stories, and I'm, I suppose, unashamedly attempting to do the same.
In Venice, you can feel daunted by the past, unequal to it. But Judy's response is not to kneel down reverentially. She starts a conversation, an argument, a live exchange. By using old techniques, she's reinvented the past and made paintings that are fresh today. So the old and the new. It can seem like a barrier divides those two things, but what Judy's done tonight is kick that barrier down. We see that the old and the new feed each other. After encountering those old Venetian paintings and then coming here, Judy seems totally wired up to the tradition of art. And after seeing this show and thinking about those old works, the old masters now feel newly fresh to me. So in the end, I don't care if a painting's made in 1500 or if it's made today. What matters is that the artist is taking their medium, reimagining it, breaking it apart, pushing it somewhere new. What matters, no matter what time the painting was made, is that painting is alive.